What's going on, fellow art warriors? Welcome back to another episode of Art Friends. This time we have a very, very special guest, Jonathan Duncan to my left. And as always, to my right, we have Oliver. And guys, Jonathan and I have been friends for quite some time. We've worked on projects together in the past. We've met in person at a LuxCon numerous times. And he was honestly kind of like my first mentor, if I'm being completely honest. And he's got some really cool stuff that he's up to. He's taken a very different route from me, to say the least. And that's what we're going to be kind of talking to him about today. And so I'd kind of like to just begin and get started with this. So first of all, hey, Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
This is going to be fun. I'm so excited, guys.
I'm just laughing already because there's too much fun in store and they have no idea.
Yeah, they have no idea. So guys, okay, cool. We already got a follower. Mr. Enemy, I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce that, but thank you for following. But yeah, Jonathan, we always start our guests off with a fun question, and that question is, if you could physically be in any video game world, what would it be?
Wow, what an awesome question that is. Physically in any game world, I'll choose Journey.
Journey, that's a good one.
I'll choose Journey.
So would you be like a human in the Journey game world, or would you be one of the little Journey guys?
I would assume that I would be a little, I don't even know if they have a name, but yeah, I guess it's like a Journey guy. And I think it's because I have an expectation that life is cyclical. You can tell I'm wearing beads on my wrist. Like you can tell I'm one of those people. And I have this idea that if this is really about some sort of greater journey that loops into itself, if that's what the game is, and there's some kind of resolution that you experience for all of eternity, that would probably be one of the more sustaining solutions to that question.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I would think that.
So what would you do in the Journey world? Would you be
You're
going
stuck on a linear
the path of the hero?
Yeah, you're definitely stuck on a linear path because of the way the game's designed. I'm expecting that I only have the assets of the game to work with. Okay. But I'm also imagining in this hypothetical that I have I don't necessarily have the understanding that I'm a person that's been transported. Like, whoa, I'm Jonathan Vair Duncan. I'm in a video game. I don't necessarily surf in there on a keyboard.
Gotcha.
Yeah, experience it. So I would assume if I was completely native to the game, then I'd be engaging much like how the players would routinely. And the amount that I get of the lore and the environment is really up to me.
That's awesome. Well, a really fun story behind Journey is that I actually have never played it myself. Grace is actually the one that played it. We picked it up so that she could get through a game. Like, I think it's the only game I've seen her like play from start to finish. And it was awesome because we kind of bought it blind, like not really knowing the kind of hidden mechanic, right? I don't know if that's a spoiler at this point or whatever. But,
I wouldn't spoil the end, but yeah.
Yeah, but like the other characters that you encounter, right? We're like, why are they chirping? Why are they like communicating with us or trying to guide us or whatever? We're like, this is really weird AI. And then it turns out that the game is actually online multiplayer, and you're basically helping each other finish your story, finish your journey. And that was really eye-opening for us, and I think that hit us the most at the end of the game compared to anything else. So that was a really cool experience.
Did you cry?
Did I cry? Maybe not with that game, but I definitely got emotional. I definitely
Coward. Did. I did cry. It's like the first game I think that... Oh, no, Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask if we're talking about something sad. Donkey Kong Country 3 if we're talking about frustration.
I can definitely feel that.
Yeah, Journey is really emotional. It's really emotional. And buying it blind is awesome too, because it costs $10, I think. And it's not a spoiler to say that you're going to play this, like to play the whole thing takes you, like no more than 2.5 hours, right? Maybe 3?
Yep.
So do you really want to spend $10 on a 3-hour game experience? And it's really easy to justify this if you think of how you would buy a movie ticket for this, and you would think twice about if you want to see it. And Journey is going to be more impactful to you than the vast majority of movies you could have seen.
I definitely agree. And there's something to be said about like you being the person that's actually controlling the character, you know, like it really puts you in this character's shoes. And the fact that there's no dialogue, it's a lot of like things that you're inferring through the text on the walls and the imagery and the landscapes and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a really great game. I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't played it yet.
That's a really good warm-up question. It's really good.
So before we dive into kind of like your artistic history, is what I would kind of like to show is a quick picture, and I don't know if you have the stream up, Jonathan, but
I do.
Okay. So this is the funniest picture of us I could find. And I kind of just wanted to show this to the chat before we dive into anything too serious.
Oh, yes. I still have this hoodie.
You do? I don't even know what shirt I'm wearing. I think may have been the first time we met. And I want to say that this was like instinctual for you to just climb up on my lap. And one of our other art friends just like took a picture of us. And I also distinctly remember like that first year of AluxCon, because you were the only person that I knew, and you obviously like invited me to come along to this experience and meet all your friends and meet all the people that you've known for a little while. And I had to bunk with like 10 dudes in a hotel room. And because I was the youngest, I remember having to sleep on the floor for 4 days straight. And I was not prepared for this. So I think I had like a thin sleeping bag and I used my hoodie as like a pillow. But yeah, that was my first introduction to actually meeting Jonathan in person. So I just wanted to share this with all of you, just so you could kind of get an idea of the relationship between Jonathan and I.
And we were working together online for, I don't even think it was a full year before this, right?
Yeah, maybe like 3/4 of a year, half a year, something like that.
Jeez.
So yeah. Well, before we get into all that stuff, I want to kind of talk about your personal artistic journey and just kind of like, you know, we don't need to go into the nitty gritty, but like, are you somebody that has always been drawing and doing art, or did you kind of jump into this later in life? How did that go?
So I started copying things and drawing ever since I was little. I really loved copying things because it gave me the chance to get more attention than my sister received, who was only 15 months my senior. And, you know, you get what you can at that age. And I eventually started drawing for more noble reasons. There was a very big shift in my relationship with art that happened probably, I want to say 10th or 11th grade, where in the face of my video game addiction, I decided to spend a little more time in my sketchbook than on my Game Boy Advance. And as silly as that sounds, I'm very serious about having a video game addiction and being more than just a consumer, but being willing to create your ideas and then build towards a future where you have a skill. That's actually something I'm very passionate about mentioning. So that was 2 years before I went to school for art, and I didn't know what my options were really. I had unlocked the concept art that was in Metroid Prime on the GameCube. I want to say this was 2001. Yeah, it was end of 2001. That's the first time where I saw that concept art could be a thing. Oh, video games sometimes need art that it's built off of, and someone is paid to draw that. Awesome, I could do that. So at the time, I knew I only wanted to create the cool thing. Just something cool, fun, maybe like moderately sexy, but nothing crazy.
Did you have the intention originally of like going into video games specifically, or did
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. And then I felt like high concept fashion was really cool and alluring because it's like it's taking the person and adorning them in a way that is, it does feel artful and bizarre. It feels like you're looking at concept art sometimes when you see a runway show. It's stuff you would never wear it in person. It's a bad idea to wear it on the street, but there's something about the context it sets up with the lights and the music where it really spoke to some deep part of me of being interested.
Gotcha.
Before I knew the fashion industry was garbage. And it's really unethical, actually. But I went from video games in college and thinking this is where I want to work, absolutely, ArenaNet or bust, to finding a more individual path, as you mentioned before. So I'm at the point now where, fast forward, I can do something like stream video games in German as part of my language studies, or I could just, you know, I've sold writing. I've done BOK, which is documenting my marriage, my divorce, addiction, recovery, navigating my beliefs. My Patreon is at a pretty healthy number, and that's really just being a professional Jonathan at that point.
Sure.
And there's no other way to describe it. You really have to forge your own path
Journey.
if you don't fit anywhere. Yeah, your own journey. Nice callback. It is truly about doing what's important to you, despite that being uncomfortable. There are growing pains I will experience the rest of my life because that's how my priorities are, but I don't regret that. You just have to work really hard to find your tribe.
It's interesting because I kind of prefaced the talk by saying that you took a different path as me. And it's kind of like, now that you're talking about this, we actually took very similar paths. I think it's just kind of like our overlying artistic interest kind of is what ended up diverting, because when we were working together, we were both like, oh, let's be concept artists. You know what I mean? Let's work for the man. And then once we got out of college, we're like, you know, screw the man. I want to work for myself kind of thing. And I think that's kind of both where we're at in our professional places, which is kind of interesting. And what I wanted to kind of back up a little bit with as well is, did you go for an art degree specifically, and what school did you go to?
So I went to Indiana Wesleyan University. This is a school that if I'm being completely honest, and I'm always going to be, unfortunately, I went there because I wanted to be babysat. I felt like if I went to Columbus College of Art and Design, which would have offered me a scholarship at the time, that I would have caught the gay and then been addicted to crystal meth and then die, because that's what artists do. I was so sheltered that I wasn't exposed to people who weren't straight, who were, you know, like articulating their journeys to me. So I'm just like, well, I have a little, you know, these feelings seated deep inside of me that I should probably just push down and then go to a place where chapel's mandatory. And then I can be forced to do good choices. And then I learned that was unhealthy. But my degree, which was initially art, I was guessing fine art. It moved to illustration after my sister and my best friend since 8th grade, who would later marry my sister. They went to the same school too. And they both were illustration majors. And my sister, who's still a professional creative to this day, she said, oh, trust me, Jonathan, you just want to do illustration. So I'm like, all right, well, screw it. I'll do illustration. And she was exactly right. That's totally what I wanted at the time. I ended up following my sister in many different facets of life. She offered me so much consultation and leadership and was almost like raising me in a way.
Interesting. Yeah, we have a pretty strong like student viewership. So I think what a lot of people would be interested in is like, do you feel that your artistic schooling kind of helped you get to where you wanted to be, or at least laid some sort of foundation? Or are you kind of in the camp that like, I shouldn't have even gone to school kind of thing?
So there is a flow chart from Lauren Panepinto.
Okay.
Have you seen it? It's called Should I Go to Art School?
I have not. That's interesting.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, so I'm going to answer your question while I pull this up.
Okay.
To art school. So what this flow chart is saying is, Panepinto. What this flow chart is saying is that there are absolutely certain reasons that make art school a viable option. So for example, are your parents wealthy enough that you will not be choked with debt for at least 1 decade to come? If they are not wealthy enough, are you willing to choke on debt? Are you willing to rice and beans or peanut butter and jelly your way through your life until you get to, because you have no guarantee that this is going to be worth the money. And if you go to a proper art school, and not just like a liberal arts school where I went to, you could be throwing away $200,000.
Sure.
And this is a profession that inherently does not require degrees. If you're going into education, like Oliver is interested in, that's a different story, right? You do actually need to consider, at least in America, pursuing an MFA. Now, I really needed to go to art school to have certain parameters set up because I had not grown up yet. I was 16. I had helicopter parents. I had very little agency, and I had a simulation of agency in a Christian liberal arts school that proved that I couldn't be trusted with handling my time as if it were really that valuable.
Gotcha.
But something that changed after I was put on academic probation, because I must have been suffering from something that I'm pretty sure was undiagnosed ADD. And also I was way better at Super Smash Brothers Melee than everyone else in my school, and I was going to milk that. I didn't do as much of my time in my studies as I should have my freshman year. But when I came back after being in a really not great community college and understanding how valuable that resource was, I came back and the blinders were off, and I realized we have all these incredible resources, but people aren't connected. In my art department, like my peers, they weren't trying as hard as I was when I was in community college. I was working a full-time job and taking classes full-time while also doing more art than they were. And I actually leveled up in my abilities despite not taking art classes because I was scared of stagnating and failing.
Sure.
It's the conventions that you and I attend that taught me that I cannot, actually I didn't attend cons yet. I guess I just tried. It taught me that you cannot wait for your classes to teach you what you have to do. Your purpose in taking a class, yes, absolutely. Your purpose in taking a class is to learn as much as you can, make as many mistakes as you can, and please, by all means, overshoot. Just like completely grind yourself into the dirt, not knowing what your own limits are, so you don't have to deal with that later in the future. Sure. It's an inevitability. You'll make mistakes, but it's so much more important than doing good in school. And your classmates, they are your peers and they are your competition on some level, I guess, but really you need to look towards your favorite artists in the studios you want to work for, or, you know, the people creating the images that you find the most engrossing. If you're not treating them as your peers, then you're just going to be the biggest fish in your little pond, and no one's going to care because you didn't do your best. You didn't give yourself the chance to do your best.
Sure. And I think beyond like a technical level, I think if we're advocating for school in any way, it's like it at least gives you the chance to work alongside other people, which you don't necessarily get all the time when you're working at home, you know, by yourself. It's very, very hard to kind of seek that opportunity to grow when you're like in a bubble. And I've mentioned this before, but I think there's something to be said, even if you're the best student in your class, just like being surrounded by other people that are all creating as well. You know, I think that creativity kind of like meshes together and gives people inspiration. So
yes, and you actually reminded me of something very important that I did not mention. What was way more important than any class or any technical ability I may have picked up were the social ramifications of being in that institution. I was in a place that was like a pressure cooker because I was around many people who weren't willing to think freely. I had my own blinders and prejudices on because of the culture of being, you know, like white, young teenager in the Midwest United States, not exposed to many other cultures at all. So I have my own share of racism and queer phobia that I hadn't unpacked yet. But this is also where I met my ex-wife. Nick was at my wedding. So that's some cool lore. My marriage and my divorce are such critical components to who I am as a person. Or, you know, Dan Martin, I was talking to him just a couple days ago. He's a very important component of my life. And Dan and I living together in Cincinnati, when we met our friend Quinn, who's also one of our LuxCon friends that Nick got to hang out with, Quinn would have killed himself if we did not reach out to him, he hypothesizes. So there are many very important things that happened because I went to school. Was that worth the money? Obviously. Quinn is worth whatever thousands of dollars I'm still choking on in debt. And my ex-wife is an amazing, incredible person who enriched my life, and I'm a more complete person because I was married to her, even if that was terminated. But when it comes to my art practice, you can get everything that you need and more by being a driven person who's willing to go to conventions and willing to purchase resources. You will spend way less money than you ever possibly could at an art school. But you need to be that kind of person. If you can't go to an art director in the middle of a busy room and say, hey, I'm a student, here's my card, and I really want to seek you out because your work's important. Could you do portfolio review? If that makes you too scared, then yeah, you definitely need an art school and you're not going to be able to handle doing stuff on your own. I couldn't handle it earlier. By sophomore year, I wished I dropped out of college, but my mom made me stay in, even so much I turned down a job from Blizzard my junior year. I didn't get to move.
I just wanted to ask you, just backtracking as well, were you part of any like societies, or did they have any groups, like artistic groups, or?
Society sounds so dignified. It might just be your accent. So I was a member of the ACM, the Association of Computing Mechanics. So this is the organization that runs SIGGRAPH, the Special Interest Group for Graphics. So if you're going to work in anything related to GPU whatsoever, even if it's medical, it doesn't need to be entertainment, but it usually will be, then getting a membership at the ACM will allow you a student entry to SIGGRAPH that is hundreds of dollars cheaper, because they just want young blood in there. They want attention. They're very serious about elevating students. You could even get to the entire show for free if you're accepted as a student volunteer. And that can be any age. It's not some sort of ageist cap. You just have to be learning full time.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't a member of any other organizations back then, and I'm not really active in the ACM anymore because my heart's not in the entertainment industry. And for me to go back to there, it would have to be a product that I would be convinced changed the world for the better. So if it wasn't doing that level of, it's going to sound pretentious, but if it's not like at least like an aggressive cultural zeitgeist that moves all of society forward, if it's just like, hey, wouldn't this game be cool? Don't care. I'm not here to make cool stuff. I'm not here to make you smile or laugh or distract you. There are millions of other artists that want that more than me. They can have it. If it's just like games about, your, like that Dragon Cancer, a dad makes a game about his kid dying of cancer and there's nothing he can do about it. It's like, oh, your kid's dying of cancer simulator. If that was a studio job, I'd be like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I want in. Let's go. We're gonna like game design empathy. I want to create assets for this. Absolutely. But that doesn't happen much in AAA studios, so
yeah,
that's how I feel about it.
This is not something I wanted to ask so early, but I want to ask it while I'm thinking about it. Have you ever considered wanting to make a game yourself, because you have this love for video games and you kind of are like a self-starter? Has that ever crossed your mind?
I linked the flowchart in the chat, by the way.
Okay,
but yes, it has crossed my mind to actually have 3 ideas for games.
Okay.
The first one I had a timeline for. I scripted. I even did maps and concept art, and it was for Ant. It's called Ant Story. My idea was about cordyceps before Last of Us existed, for the record, but I'm sure we saw the same Planet Earth episode where we're like, that'd be good for a game. The short version of that is that, and this is not how cordyceps work, but the short version is that you have a single ant who is ejected from the hive mind and collective conscious of this tribe because of cordyceps. So your controls freak out. You lose your inability to connect to other ants. You can't even track pheromone trails from your tribe anymore. And you have to seek out and ask yourself the question, should I die here or should I see if there's anything more? That's the purpose of the game. And if you fulfill everything that you can do as an ant, then you actually save all the other ant tribes except for one that died previously. And it's very sad and it pulls on your heartstrings. You save all the other ants because despite you being a single ant, being ejected from the hive mind, you got to interact with the world in a way that they couldn't. The cordyceps freed you, and this thing that was actually deadly and limiting to you was also the most important part of your identity and you serving others. So think of it as an edutainment kind of game that's between like Dora the Explorer and Dark Souls. Not very marketable.
Gotcha.
The other idea that I had that would be equally unmarketable would be a bunch of children having comas from all different parts of the world, and they're in an overworld. And they all speak different languages, and you don't get subtitles, but all the languages are real, and you have to connect to them, and it's a rhythm action game. So it'd be like if
really cool.
Like an action JRPG with timed button presses. And as you spend more time with them, then you actually get subtitles in the language of the player, and you get to find out, oh, this person's speaking Farsi. Oh, this person's speaking Cantonese. And then it's about navigating why children can get along so well despite such vast cultural differences.
Sure. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely thinking outside the box with these ideas. I'd love to see you at one point pull the trigger on one of these and start something. I know it's a big undertaking, and this is kind of where I am at this point, where I wanted to do the same thing. I'm like, I have all these ideas. I'm just going to make a video game. And here we are in the process. But I know that you're kind of doing some important work on your own behalf that's not like you said, entertainment based. So do we want to get into this yet? Let's follow the journey a little bit more. Okay, so I totally forget. Were you still in college when we started working on this project together?
I freshly graduated.
You just graduated, okay.
Yeah,
and that was
graduated
right after you turned down that job, right? Because I remember this. I vaguely remember this. Okay.
Yeah, so Blizzard, and I was actually working on a trade. So, you know, like an art trade, like you draw for your friend, they draw for you. So gotcha. I had a friend in the furry fandom who's the reason I found alchemy, and he was actually a big influence on my aesthetics before I found Rick Barry and other people. And I was doing an art trade for this furry artist while I was at SIGGRAPH in the art section. I was working on a Cintiq, like, wow, a Cintiq. I know, oh, you can draw on the screen. This is so amazing. And I was there, and there's this guy that came up behind me, and he said, wow, this is incredible work. What company do you work for? And I thought he was just dicking with me. Yeah. So like, all right, buddy, I'm just like in school right now. He said, really? Where do you train? Like, where do you train? Like, this is some vocational school that has organization. Are you kidding me? Okay, buddy, I train at Indiana Wesleyan University, which he's not going to know about because it's in the middle of a very racist cornfield. And yeah, I don't recommend going to that school, by the way. My teachers were nice, but no, I don't recommend it. So he's just like, that doesn't, okay, whatever. Well, would you be interested in working in the game industry? Yeah, like, are you going to make me sell knives? Like, what's happening? Can we just cut to the end where I'm tired of this, pyramid scheme? I look at his badge and it says Hunter Grant, cinematic director, Blizzard Entertainment.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, what the fuck? And he handed me a postcard that was an invitation for their cinematic department, and that wasn't even public info yet.
Oh my God. So
the reason,
why did you turn this down?
My mom made me.
Oh, that's okay.
And I didn't know that I had agency in that dynamic, because to my parents' credit, graduating from college 1 generation ago was everything. And 2 generations ago, when my grandparents, as first generation Americans, they had to really fight to get higher education. That was the path to success. And there are many things you cannot do if you don't go to college back then. And in some cases, that's still true, definitely. For art, that doesn't matter in any way at all. Yeah. So
I've never had somebody ask to look at my GPA or my, whatever.
I brag about my GPA. I calculated my senior year how to pass by 1/10 of a point to pass my major. So I could be like, okay, well, this is how much work I have to do to get all C's, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time on concept art for games and getting into galleries, which worked. I did do that. So they're like, wow, Jonathan, you're one of my favorite students, but you are one of the worst students I've ever had. Thank you so much. That's exactly what I wanted. I'm here to learn. I'm not here to get good grades. Thank you for noticing. And to credit of Indiana Wesleyan, every single professor that I went to, where I said, hey, I'm not here for good grades. I'm not here for, just being nice. I'm here because I want to learn as much as possible, and here are my priorities. 100% of the professors went, okay, cool. Well, focus on this assignment, and here you go. And they understood I did my best. There was an original question here that I feel like I didn't touch on. Could you remind me? Because my memory is garbage. This was about so why I didn't accept it. Yeah. So if you have a mom who's also a mom and a stepfather who are working very hard to support you, you have a dad dipping out of his retirement fund, and it's with the intention of graduating and getting a degree. I feel like there's a level of disrespect there if I drop out but don't have the means to articulate it. At the time, in my inexperience, I could not articulate why it was much more important for me to leave.
Sure.
And the only job I got from my degree was working at Starbucks, because having a college degree was just to vet people. That's it. It's just to say, okay, well, you have this much money and you can finish what you start and show up to things on time, more or less. So that's literally the only time in my life my degree has given me anything whatsoever.
Sure. Gotcha.
Do with that info what you want, students.
Well, I think it does go to show, just in general, kind of what we were talking about before, is like things just kind of lead you in ways, and you just have to like take opportunities as they arise, or don't take them. And in your case, like if you had taken that job, that would have dramatically altered your path, you know. And I don't necessarily know. It could have been better. It could have been worse. It would have just been very different. It would have been very different from the path you're on now, you know. I was in a similar situation where like my parents were like, you got to go to like not an art school. You can still get an art degree, but don't go to an art school, right? So that's why I went to Penn State University, and they didn't have the greatest art program, but I still kind of learned fundamentals and took traditional classes and stuff like that, whatever. But where I'm getting to is like, this through, you know, going to school and working outside of, you know, classes and trying to like get commissions and do whatever, I found this opportunity online of like, hey, we can't pay you, but we're working on an MMO. And I'm like, okay. So I sent in some work. I did like an art test for this free job. And this woman, you know, test? I think I did. I think I sent.
I didn't do an art test.
Yeah, because you're Jonathan. You know, like I was still a student as well, so I think that may have had something to do with it. But yeah, I sent her work, whatever, and I got this job, and you know, I was like I think I was there first, right? And you came on later. Yeah. So like I was like the only concept artist, right? So when all of a sudden our boss was like, hey, we got this guy, Jonathan, who, you know, was going to get this job at Blizzard, and he's a really awesome artist. And then she tells me, yeah, he's going to be like directing you or whatever, like, you know, helping you with art. I was kind of like, oh, I don't want that. You know, I want to do this myself. You know, I didn't want somebody to like kind of step on my toes.
And I stepped on your toes.
You definitely did. And I think at first, you know, just because of the way you are, you know, like I didn't know how to interact at first. And it's just so funny how everything turns out, because it started from competition, more or less, you know, into just being like, all right, I know he's older than me. He has a little bit more experience. He's got better fundamentals. Like, especially looking back at this old work, you know, I thought at the time, like, oh, I'm just as good as Jonathan. But looking back, I was
that didn't cross my mind.
I was thinking.
But I feel that though. I totally feel it.
But
and then it felt like we're in the same burning, sinking ship together.
I think that's kind of what maybe connected us, probably more than anything, because our boss kept saying like, yeah, I'm talking to these investors and we're gonna, you know, get this money to build an engine from scratch and blah, blah, blah. And we're just sitting here thinking like, oh my God, there's not even any programmers and you have this like MMO you want to build. Like, this is going to take 30 years to make. But, you know, again, I think you were kind of in a similar position where it's like, this was the first like real opportunity. And it was cool to kind of like be on a small team, brainstorm with everybody, have the opportunity to like make characters that like all existed in the same space. And Jonathan and I also kind of became like the lore guys, even though like I think she had like a writer, right? And we would just sit and like brainstorm really cool story ideas and think about like specifically why each race had their own identity, why they looked like this, like what cultural influences we wanted to research to kind of like put into these characters, and how everybody would exist in the world as if it was a real world. Our boss was very much the person who was like, World of Warcraft, light and dark. And Jonathan and I are like, okay, you can keep your light and dark, but we're going to figure out a way to make it deep, you know? So
what if it wasn't just good or bad, but it's more complicated?
Yeah, exactly. We wanted this world to feel like it was a real world. And this is stuff we were thinking of like at a very early age. And it was something that I think, you know, pushed just my storytelling to the next level. And I think Jonathan is the one that came into the project. Like, I was still at that point where, again, I was a student and I was kind of just like, oh, our gold armor is cool, and like making the characters look like sexy for no reason or whatever. And Jonathan's
Can I shit on one of your images for a sec?
Yeah.
Cool. Do you remember that one image you did for the female warrior, and she had a wedgie, but it was a metal wedgie because it was just like metal bikini on bare legs and there was no even fabric underneath it?
Oh, I specifically remember, like, this is something that still sticks in my head, is like, if somebody, even a man or a woman, whatever, is wearing armor, they need to have cloth underneath because nobody would feel comfortable with metal on their skin.
And if you do that as anyone who's drawing, and it doesn't even need to be concept art, if you care enough for any personal work at all to have weight with a strap, but then you have a layer underneath and you show the layer, it will, if you think about it, even if you're bad at drawing, if you at least think about it, you've automatically elevated your concept. Even if the drawing's bad, if you put it there, it will look way better every time.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
So these are the kinds of discussions that we were having. And I think, you know, I want to say that I was giving as much as I was taking in terms of like critique and advice and stuff like that. But I think to a certain extent, because we were always working together and always pushing each other's concepts, there was a lot of back and forth. And I think that helped us excel really early on. And it's like, I honestly think I was learning more from this free project, not getting paid, than I was like in my actual classes. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know if I was in school and, wishing to seek an opportunity like this if it would have worked out the same way if I just hadn't gone to school. So
very true.
So yeah, Jonathan and I were working on this project, and let me show some work. And this is like early Nick work and early Jonathan work. And Oliver, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing it actually. Old work. I was going to ask Jonathan, did you play Dungeons and Dragons at all? Any D&D stuff? Or?
I did one campaign with a lot of mutual. Well, Nick was in this campaign. He had a character named Jacob Orkman, and I drew him as a half orc, actually. So we did a few games of 3rd edition, and it didn't get very far. We couldn't have done more than a couple games, maybe just a handful. When it comes to role playing, as I got more deeply invested into my fellow man, that intensity left very little room for me to role play. So the closest I come to role playing now is if I play as Mewtwo in Smash Brothers Ultimate. I decide to listen to Linkin Park and I pick the dark color Mewtwo so I can pretend I'm edgy. And aside from that, wait, what were those images?
So I think these are from before you hopped on, when I was just designing without any guidance. You know what I mean?
This was not before, though.
Are you sure?
Currently on this. Yeah, the one where this is work where this looks like it was your response to a LuxCon.
Oh, possibly.
So I remember the work.
I don't know where that is then.
So I do have a project redacted folder on Dropbox that I could probably send. So
yeah, these were after. Yeah, you're right. These were after a LuxCon. I do not know where my like really old Project Vero stuff is. Actually, okay. So let me just show you guys Jonathan's work. Like he was kind of leagues ahead of me in terms of just like critical thinking with these designs, and you just had a very like unique sort of style. And I think that's
so vulnerable for me.
What our boss, I mean, these, in my opinion, these still look good. I mean, there's some weird proportional stuff going on.
Yeah.
But the style is like really, really cool.
We're talking about the rock people now. So the rock people, the initial design was that they need fabric on their. They need fabric around their waist and around their chest because there will be kids playing this, and we don't want them to talk about the boobs.
Yeah, this was our boss's feedback.
So I said, no, we're not adding cloth to rock people. What are they going to do? Wear cloth because they saw people do that. And they're like, haha, neat. They come from a fucking volcano. They're not going to wear cloth because they saw the people wearing cloth. And they're like, oh, I wish I was like them. That's not going to happen. They didn't even know where the people came from. So this is an example of Nick and I caring more than other people did.
And I think this is what I did to kind of like quell both
compromise.
Compromise is like, what if they have this like volcanic armor that they put on, so it doesn't look like cloth, but it looks like it kind of makes a purpose, and it still looks stupid. But
here's another thing to mention: Nick was a master of compromise. He, to this day, he was perfect at communicating with the project manager. Well, yeah, and like director. I wasn't even the art director. I wish I was. I was supposed to be. But he was great at communicating with her. And then every time I communicated with her, it just turned to shit 100% of the time. And I did my best. I followed a pipeline, and it was not good enough. It's not good enough every time. But she loved everything Nick did. Why can't you do more like what Nick's doing? Oh, okay. Can you articulate what specifically? Well, like it just feels like this. Can you what do you think of these edges? What do you think of those outfits? I just like all of it.
Yeah, I think it was these early gripes that we had that really started to lead me into the idea of man, I just need to do my own thing. And that's not for everybody. I'm not saying that this is advice to abide by, but for me personally, I just had so many experiences with managers that I wasn't necessarily clicking with, that I was maybe I need to just do this myself. So yeah, go ahead, Oliver.
I just wanted to ask, so it's because iterations and feedback, is it something that you kind of was it a bit of a challenge? Did you find it quite a challenge? I don't know how to explain it.
From our director's standpoint, or between each other?
Maybe you could talk a bit about from both sides.
I think Jonathan and I both like to think we're right about everything. So I think that a lot of times there was sort of conflict between us agreeing on something if we just didn't agree on it. But again, the compromise thing, I think we always came to some sort of solution at the end of the day. And we kind of understood that about each other. But yeah,
there's a lot we didn't articulate that we just got.
Yeah, right. Again, we were a lot younger too. We've had. This is 2012, so that was 8 years ago. We've learned a lot since then, obviously. And then like Jonathan was saying, our boss was just not articulate at all, and was just I like this or I don't like this. And most likely, if you are managing a artistic project, a heavily artistic project, you should have more critical feedback than just yes or no, or I like this or I don't like this, to some extent. You don't need to be an artist yourself necessarily, but you'd hope that there'd be more critical feedback. So for us, that was a struggle, because like we were saying, we were trying to kind of push the envelope with making this MMO a little bit deeper, because again, at the time, a lot of what was out was World of Warcraft kind of stuff, which is fun, but basic on a conceptual level, right? So it was, for us, it was tough to kind of go back and forth with her.
My take on it is that I didn't feel of course I would say this, I didn't feel I needed to be right all the time, but I think something I was articulating is that it's fine if you do not agree, but I want you to start being a dynamic and active participant in your own ideas. I want to know that you've put in the effort trying to figure out why a thing works, because working on intuition will not be enough for us to do justice to these characters. If they are to feel real, we have to be willing to go outside our frame of reference.
Sure.
Right. Because I was just gonna say, because I know a lot of directors love variations or coloration or iteration. I just wanted to hear how you kind of dealt with.
This was such a mess of a idea of a thing that there was just none of that. I think for ourselves, we probably did some sketches and iteration and stuff like that, but our boss only wanted to see the final product. You know what I mean?
Yes.
She did not want to see thinking along the way. She didn't even care about the thinking. She just cared if it looked cool and if it would sell, because she thought that if she brought this to investors or whatever, that would, grant us the money we needed to make this project. And
I have a +1 on that too.
Yeah. And I just think that this is something that younger people, or people getting into a project for the first time, should be a little bit wary about and kind of look out for. We did have a discussion a while ago, Oliver, about red flags with clients. And, me knowing what I know now, everything about this project was a red flag. Do I regret working on it? No, because then I wouldn't have met Jonathan, And I'm going to kind of lead into how this eventually dramatically helped me. But at the time, I kind of figured what do I have to lose kind of thing. I'm a student. I don't need to pay the bills right now, so to speak. and it was just something to kind of like help me build up a portfolio.
So I did want to add on to this too.
Yeah.
I've linked you to a folder that has some of my stuff, which actually includes process that is closer to what you'd expect to see from concept art. So that's linked in our chat right here.
Okay.
In Discord. Yeah. So you'll get to see when I actually did use flowcharts, and this was when the project was nearing its natural conclusion. So feel free to share any of that if you find it useful.
Yeah.
But
okay, I'm pulling it up.
Nick had a situation where he was far more financially secure than I was. Not only was I freshly married, but I had tons of front end expenses with my marriage. It was just like, it was really complicated and really expensive, and please just trust me on that. So when I was needing money, I was also doing, what's it called? What's that monkey job that you just like plug in stuff? Data entry. Okay. So I was doing data entry for the same project manager, and it didn't have to do with the game. And she was equally bad at, managing in that. So I was trying to start websites without knowing the platform and having to learn. It was really hard for me to learn. No one was teaching me, and I wasn't getting paid to teach. And I was an independent contractor, so I had very few rights. I would do, for example, this is a flow chart where we can see the letters. And I would tell the project manager, from all these silhouettes and design elements, A through D, which one's the most enjoyable? And if you like certain aspects of other letters, just, bring it together. Let me know which works. I would do it. I'd come back with the next row, and then I'd come back with the next row. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I got done with the colors, after we followed the design iteration, we would do the pipeline, and then she would say, well, I just don't like it now. Can we go back to the other ones? And I said, okay, well, you liked the designs before. What has changed since then? I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. Can you tell me why? No? Okay, well, I think it's time for me to go.
Yeah.
But she couldn't handle even the most basic of linear approaches. And because she never asked for that before, that's part of why a pipeline didn't get to form. We were so busy trying to generate content to throw as a splash when we are trying to get angel investors excited. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I would pull all-nighters to update content because I'm thinking, oh, we can't show this old iteration. We have such better work and we have all these ideas to implement. I would pull all-nighters while I was working at Starbucks, while I was still doing freelance commissions, and she would not use them ever because she liked the other one that was way less time and less detail and less consideration without saying why.
And there was also just the red flag of if you're working for free and somebody's talking about investors, like, you better well know who that investor is, or at least very, very specifically what the approach is. She was very vague about everything, which is a little sneaky to me, especially knowing what I know now. So,
yes.
So that just, again, like if you guys are, working on any projects, there's one way to look at it is just like, I don't care what happens. I'm just going to do some work to build up my portfolio, and that's totally fine. But if you do care and you're being led on to think that this is going to potentially turn into something real, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions kind of thing, because it's really important to kind of like succeeding with something like this. There's a lot of BS out there. So
I think, oh, it's gone. Yeah, Jonathan.
Oh, okay. I was going to say it, especially you always have rights as a worker. That's going to change in minutia from country to country and maybe even from state to state, but you always have worker rights that you need to be aware of. In the case of working for free on a project, something that you need to do up front, no matter what, is say, I can give you this much time per week. And you can, if you can't do that, like, sorry, grandma died, grandmas do, can't work that much because I'll be at a funeral. Just tell them my time has changed. I can't deliver this amount here. So the only way to shit the bed, like really truly shit the bed in something like getting your footing with a freelance career, is to just disappear and to not communicate. If you tell someone, even if they've given you like thousands of dollars on a project, if you tell them, hey, I can't do this anymore, here's your money. I'm so sorry my situation's changed. I was really excited to work with you, but there's circumstances out of my control and I have to go. That person's going to be a little sad but they'll understand because you communicated and you didn't disappear with their money, and that means a lot. Now, ideally, if you're a real badass, you can be the person that then picks up the job last minute and you get a rush fee that's triple and you get it done in less than 24 hours. And everyone's like, oh, thank God you saved my ass. And you're totally worth $6,000 instead of $2,000. You can be like, cool, that felt nice. But a student, that's not your job. You're still trying to make your mistakes and figure out your limits. But at the very least, you have to say, I can only do this much. And that's all you're getting. This is for fucking free. Don't you dare take advantage of me.
Yeah.
I have worth.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. Go ahead, Oliver. I think you had another question.
No, it's just I think for me it's a it was a good lesson for me as well, because like I think it's not something that's talked about in art schools. Even like I'm currently in university, and it's still like they don't talk about the more how to actually make a living side of it, or the business side of it. I do know some schools in California, like the Brainstorm, they're starting to teach about how to approach clients, but I feel it's still something that I myself definitely fall in a trap in. So because they get to like investors getting like free artists almost to build their product without any background checks.
And again, like Jonathan said, it's kind of like you kind of have to just make your mistakes and learn from them and move on. It's almost sometimes like you become a stronger person when you get the opportunity to make mistakes, because then you just know to never do that again, or you know in the same sort of situation how to make it better, right? And that's kind of the philosophy I've tried to live by as I've like proceeded in my career. But I kind of want to go into more of like a positive route from this project, which is, you know, like really starting to connect with Jonathan and going to a LuxCon. So that first year is when Jonathan recommended, and I'm sure like our fans have heard this story a million times, but like Jonathan was like, hey, there's this thing called a LuxCon. It's like 30 minutes from, you know, where you go to school. You should just come and join us. Because like he had already gone, I think he had went like a year or two already before me. So you had
probably
like
2 years.
A group of friends, and you had known people and stuff like that. And you're like, I'll kind of like introduce you to people. I was like, all right. I distinctly remember, guys, driving in my car, calling my dad on the way there, because I was like, Dad, I'm so nervous. I don't know any of these people. I've never met Jonathan in real life. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And he's like, Nick, it's going to be fine. You got to just go with the flow and just see what happens. You're overthinking it. And at the end of the day, that's what I tried to do, you know, and it obviously worked out. So yeah, I met Jonathan. He introduced me to this whole group of guys that, you know, I only keep in touch with a couple of them at this point, but it's still like, you know, I've had some awesome memories there. And, you know, in terms of career, what really helped me with going to this specific convention was a lot of art directors would walk the floor, and you had the full right to just walk up to them and be like, hey, can I pick your brain? Or, hey, can I show you my portfolio or whatever? And generally people were pretty cool with it. And it was one of those things where, you know, I'd meet with Jonathan every year. We'd go, we'd learn from people, we'd grow. And it got to the point where I kept showing work and kept improving and taking in the advice I was given, and finally got to the point where I was being commissioned like professional work from these art directors, you know? And I think that's what really kind of like sparked my career and sort of like pushed me over to the next level. And for me, that's why I'm a huge advocate of just like going out and meeting people and making art friends and, you know, doing that kind of stuff, because I think it's going to make you better quicker than just being like, I'm just going to work by myself and try to watch YouTube or whatever and, you know, get better that way. For me, and I think I said this even last time on the broadcast, but it's like a mentality shift 9 times out of 10 that pushes your art to the next level more than like watching somebody do a different technique, right? And it was a lot of these little tips that I would pick up that would kind of help me with that. So, yeah, what did you think about a LuxCon, Jonathan?
Well, first off, I also want to say I was an extremely nervous wreck when I first went there too. It just happened to be like a year or two before you did.
Yeah.
Now this, like all these artists I looked up to were in the same room. And they're really some of the best artists I'd ever met in person to that point. And I was nothing. I was just like, I was ripping off a few artists messily and didn't know what I was doing. But I had enough fundamentals where I could draw. My first portfolio review was with, well, first I was with Jeremy Cranford. He was the art director for Blizzard Entertainment's trading card game when that was a thing. Before, I guess it's replaced by Hearthstone now. Okay, didn't think of that until now. So I heard Jeremy was going to be the strictest of all the art directors. I heard that he will tear you a new one. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll do the best I can while I'm still in college, and I'll just go to him. And I think this was 2009, so this was 11 years ago for me. I went to Jeremy Cranford after signing up for him, and I said, hey, I heard you are you're a very direct person. So feel free to tear me a new one. I'm here for learning experience, and I really appreciate it. So he was looking through my portfolio and said, oh, are you good at drawing? And I thought, that's a weird question, but okay, I guess I'll answer it. Well, yeah, I can draw a facsimile of things off of a reference. And he said, weird, I can't tell that from this work. Do you use thumbnails? And I said, oh, for those you're looking at, I did not use thumbnails. And he went, yeah, I could tell. So here's the thing about this, Jonathan. If you are if you take a piece of shit, like a shit cake, and you put frosting on it, it's still going to taste like shit. So this is like a shit cake with frosting. I don't know what's going on with this fabric. I don't know what's going on with this hand. It's just like, you can't polish a turd and expect it to look good. So there's some fundamentals that are missing here. But hey, keep up the good work. I'm really excited to see what you do in the future. And I laughed and was like, all right, yeah, that's exactly what I signed up for. Thank you so much. Yeah. So you can bet I use thumbnails from that point on. I don't use it as much anymore for different reasons, but I was much more serious about how I did hands, how I did fabric. And I also got to go to the chair of my illustration department and said, so I was told this was a shit cake with frosting. You said it looked fine. Would you like to explain why I embarrassed myself in front of an art director for Blizzard Entertainment?
Oh my God.
And he said, well, he's a very encouraging, very kind person who's also deathly afraid of turning off anyone from art.
Sure.
So he said, it's inappropriate to just, when someone's asking for help, to just say every single thing that they could possibly do. It's not really realistic. And I don't want to put you in a position where you feel like you're far away. And I told him, what's actually worse than doing that is not doing that, and then me finding out from someone that's a 9-hour drive away who gave me the courtesy time to do that. And I'm also paying thousands of dollars to be at this college. So can we not? Don't coddle me. I'm not here to be coddled.
Yeah.
There are some people who would not bounce back from that from that kind of a portfolio review. So to those kinds of students who I'm sure there are people in here wincing who are like really uncomfortable by that story. I want to reference one of my favorite art educators, Sterling Hundley. A student asked him, do you think I'm good enough to make it? Just like in the industry, period, whatever it is. And Sterling said, if there is anything I can tell you to convince you to stop doing this art practice, you are not good enough to make it. So you see how this was not about current drawing ability. It was about the mindset, exactly what Nick said. It is about you saying, okay, this hurts. I'm not doing what I want to right now, but this is a normal part of the human experience. And I am willing to take a posture of humility and learning and perseverance. You need to be stubborn, you need to be hardworking, and you need to be kind at exactly the same time. And sometimes you have to toggle those on and off. But if you go to a portfolio review and you get someone's opinion and they're there for you to learn what you really think about it, that's not the time to defend yourself. You have to accept their opinion. Don't explain yourself. You shut the fuck up. You take notes and you say, thank you. And you learn as much as you can. So I never had a portfolio review that bad after that one.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it not scary. Talking to people is terrifying. I professionally talk to people all the time, and I can talk to thousands of people on stage now, and that doesn't bother me. But I had to do that for like 4 years before I was comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Some people do it their whole lives and they hate it. So I don't want to discredit anyone here who's like, man, I have social anxiety. I don't know if I can do that. But are you going to live your whole life letting your insecurities and your discomfort quantify what you can do? Or are you going to challenge yourself dynamically? Because you only get one life to live, probably, more or less, maybe. And you get to decide right now for yourself at a crossroads, will you be the best you can be, no matter what the growing pains are? Or are you just going to go, it sounds hard. I'm uncomfortable. I'm a little scared of it, even if it's good. If it's good, but scary, you better do it. And if you do that the rest of your life, you will go places you never thought possible. But you have to make that decision now, because it's a posture change. And that is totally signing up for suffering. But it's totally worth it. You'll do such cool stuff.
Yeah.
Sadly, it is going to be a balance.
Yeah, I love that. I have kind of a similar story as well. Like my first year at LuxCon, I'm not sure if I should name drop her, but one of the artists that I really looked up to as well, I kind of went up to her. I'm like, hey, can you look at my portfolio kind of thing? And she just did not like what I had. And I think I don't want to, basically pass judgment on what she may have thought of me, but I could kind of get the feeling that she was not like profiling me, but just like, oh, this is another kid that's, whatever. And what's funny is like that kind of drove me to be like, I'm going to show her, I'm going to get really good so that nobody looks at me like that again, and then, I ended up becoming friends with her, and, she likes my work now. And, it's one of those things where, like Jonathan said, you kind of just have to like eat it at a certain point when you're just starting out, and you have to take those risks and do the thing, because I still get nervous to talk to some artists sometimes. It's just, it's just inherently who I am. But after you kind of work up that courage and get over it, to a certain extent, like it's going to benefit you at the end of the day. And it's going to be something that does push you to that next level. It's something that every artist has to experience at some point, I think.
There's one artist I went to who did not like my work. He just said, well, this isn't really what I'm into, and it seems like you're going for stuff. This was like really loose, poorly structured, kind of fashion, kind of fantasy art stuff that you could tell I didn't know what the fuck I even wanted. I just was begging to want something, but I'm just a kid and I don't know what I'm doing or what I like. So he told me, well, you got to work on your basics and this sort of stuff. Jeremy Cranford would later confirm this kind of stuff. And I went to this artist a couple years later and said, hey, do you mind to follow up a review of my stuff? Because you gave me a lot of really helpful critiques and I wanted to see what you think now. So he did not remember the interaction, but he saw the work and said, well, what did I ask you to do? And I said, okay, well, you said change the hands. I had to care about props. My compositions were weak. I had to do more thumbnails. And he went, oh, well, gosh, good work. This doesn't look like you have any of these issues now. I don't know what I'd suggest, because this is way different from what I do. And it's way different from what I normally help people with. But yeah, I'm glad it was really helpful to you. So even though I wasn't expecting an ass pat, but it was really just eating shit, just like completely eating shit and opening yourself up to that critique that hurts, but it's cathartic. And then you get to do something with it. And how much more valuable it is to open yourself up to it and then do the amazing thing rather than hiding from it. Yeah. Don't hide from it. Don't do it. Yeah. Don't hide from it. So also, I have unfortunate news. I actually do have to run to the bathroom, but I will be right back.
Go ahead.
So gathering questions for the chat might work now if that's a good time, but whatever. Yeah, I'll be back.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really interesting for me and so, because it's like I feel like the baby in this chat, and like kind of coming out myself and just like getting that portfolio feedback. So it's really great to hear.
I mean, what's cool is you're already taking risks, Oliver, that I wasn't at your age and where you're at. And I think having those opportunities earlier probably would have helped me a little bit more if I had thought to do them, or if I had, gone through with it. So it's kind of yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I will say that like for me, the benefit from going to art school was actually exposing to that kind of like thing as well, personally, because although I didn't go to like a normal university school, it was a private school in Vancouver, and I think just that exposure, sometimes you need that exposure to meet people, because I think it's very for like new artists if they're at home, and I feel like just going online doesn't
have the same effect.
the same effect. Yeah, because I feel like you need that one-to-one connection before you can like get to that stage of like, meeting other artists and breaking that barrier, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's like that sort of like old adage, which it's like, going to grab a beer with somebody is like the best way to connect with them, kind of thing. Like you never really know exactly how those conversations are going to go, or what you're going to learn, or what you're going to learn about the other person, until you just do stuff like that. We're talking about basically just going to grab a beer with another artist and kind of having that human interaction more so than the online interaction. And it's kind of sad to say that right now, because I know it's hard for everybody to have more human interaction. But once things get back to normal, we strongly advocate for going out and like meeting people, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. There's truly no replacement for a relationship. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the more you share of yourself and what's important to you with your work, the more you find people who click, and you can eventually, I promise you, eventually, I don't care if you're going to a Comic-Con or a Furry Con or a LuxCon, but if you keep sharing yourself with work, you will get fans that are going out of their way to talk to you, because they already understand important parts of who you are as a person. Mm-hmm. But you only get to do that if you put yourself out there and you decide to create artwork that's about what matters to you the most.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, a lot of you also haven't articulated that necessarily. So it's a really good opportunity to say, why do I create? What should I do with my limited time on this earth? Mm-hmm. Because the sooner you ask yourself that, the greater and sooner your chances will be for getting to do work that affects a positive change. And it just keeps you from wasting your time on stuff that doesn't actually matter to you, because you could do that unintentionally your whole life. People do it all the time.
Yeah,
you're going to say?
That leads me to an interesting point. I have a current mentee that I'm working with, and we were kind of looking through her portfolio and talking about work she should be doing. And she's like, yeah, I'm really interested in like, tabletop games and fantasy stuff, and, making characters. And we were talking then about like, well, why do you have so much fan art in your portfolio? And she's like, because all the advice I've been given is, I'm not going to make it unless I do fan art. And I felt like so bad that like that was the advice she was given. And basically I said, there's nothing wrong with doing fan art. If it's something you actually like doing, then do it. But if you're just doing fan art to cultivate a following, that's not something that's going to last forever. Do something that is going to, put your mark on this earth. And, like Jonathan is just saying, like, share who you are with people. That to me is what's most important. And I just felt so bad that she was steered in this direction, because she makes really cool characters. She was actually showcasing an original design to me that I was reviewing that she did, and it was like amazing. And I was like, why aren't you doing more of this stuff? Well, because I was told to do fan art. What's that?
Yeah, that happens to pros too. There's a guy at LuxCon who didn't know about One Fantastic Week, which is wild. I thought everyone knew about that at LuxCon by now. And he's a artist he's done over 300 Magic cards. And the reason why he hasn't spent time on his personal work, which is really cool, by the way, but he just doesn't show it, is because he's like, well, I have a wife and a kid to feed, and I can't just do my personal work. But if we all know the name Pete Moorbacher and Angel Arium, I hope we know about this. That's really important. One of the two guys that does One Fantastic Week, he was losing money because he had personal work next to the Magic the Gathering cards. Mm-hmm. So every time someone would be like, oh, wow, this is really cool stuff. Oh, I have that card. Can you sell my card? I love Magic. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with Magic and nothing wrong with doing Magic art, but there is a space for you and the ideas that you want to put out there. Eventually, it is going to compete. Mm-hmm. And you can definitely have a sustainable career with your own ideas, but that has to be a posture you assume. It's a long-term thing. It's a marathon. And it's worth it. And you could make more money than you could with Magic the Gathering. So say I did, what do Magic cards pay as a starting right now? I forget. Is it 1,000? Yeah. Okay, so I get just over $1,000 per month on my Patreon. Mm-hmm. I'm getting paid to write articles about kid pics or the complicated relationship the United States has to pornography, these kinds of things. I write about this as it relates to me. I write the stuff I wish I had read 15 years ago, and I get paid to do that better than Magic the Gathering can pay me. And I'm getting paid to be myself. And I only accept clients if I can do work that's going to elevate the quality of their lives by fulfilling a need, not just a desire. And if a Magic card taps into something that I really love, where I'm like, oh, that's right in my wheelhouse, that would be so much fun, I would do this for free, but thanks for the $1,000. I would probably take it to be like, yeah, I did this once, but that's not necessary anymore. And if Pete's Patreon is at, I don't know, 4K or whatever, I don't remember what it is. If someone comes to him for a commission, he says, okay, well, can you pay me at least this much money because my Patreon supporters are already paying me 4K per month to do a personal painting. And I like doing these and they like it. So you have to pay me more than that to make this worth my time. You can have those things, but oh man, you've really got to be brave. Yeah. You got to be brave and you got to be stubborn against your negative feelings.
But I do want to say also, it's just dependent on like what path you are interested in taking. Like not everybody wants to or needs to necessarily do their own thing and be independent and do that kind of thing. If you just want to be a freelance artist and want to work with various clients, that's totally cool. I think that's a different discussion than doing fan art, because fan art is like still trying to cultivate your own community by using other people's IP, as opposed to getting paid professionally from a company to do their work, right? For a product or something like that.
Yeah. And something I really don't like about fan art is that you're at the mercy of another IP. And, you know, the fan art things that we love. So comics, books, film, all that stuff. This is an artist's response to the world. So what you're doing is responding to the artist's response. There are several filters between you and responding to the world. If you are not creating the things from yourself, from the ground up, if that's possible, there's nothing new under the sun, but stick with me. If you get to engage from your own experiences and then make your own thing, that's an inherently different kind of intimacy than doing the fan art. This does not invalidate fan art and all the cool things it has or the role it has in society, which is really important. It's basically, it's a contemporary religion. We have a need for heroes and we have a need for narratives we can plug into. That's why superhero films are huge. It's why comics have only, exploded since their iteration. You don't want to just be a consumer, and you also don't want to be someone who their entire life only says, oh, I like this story, so I'll do it. When I honestly think you have more important stories in the complexities of your life than anything a Spider-Man story arc can offer. You can create stories that, if you so choose to, share a personal truth and unite you to people who will love you and respect you. And the fan art by itself can only do so much, even though it does fulfill an important function in society. So as long as people think I'm not making some negative statement about fan art being undeserved, I'm definitely not feeling that way about fan art at all. I did, fan art commission recently. That was a lot of fun.
I think it's just harder to interject yourself into fan art than it would even be like getting a Magic card. Like I've seen Magic artists that do just Magic cards, but they kind of have an identity behind their style and behind what they're trying to tell, their voice behind it, right? And I think if all you're doing is superheroes or whatever, it's kind of, it just kind of like is what it is at the end of the day. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe somebody can suggest some other fan artist that, has a whole identity with it or something like that. But in general, I guess what we're saying is that, if you feel the need to, if you have that desire to tell stories yourself, make your own stuff, don't feel like you have to do fan art, right? So
another thing fan art's incredible at is, for example, if you were talking about shipping and fan fiction and whatnot, having erotic pairings that aren't necessarily canonical, that can seem really silly outside, but it's actually a deeply important context to people understanding their own sexualities and their own identities. Gender and sexual identity is delivered often to people who discover these stories. It really does fulfill an important role in society. And if that's through fan fiction, that someone learns a deep truth about themselves, cool, that's fine. If it's through fan art, yeah, by all means. That's I'm really grateful that you got to experience it.
So yeah, so we are at kind of the AlluxCon stage. I think I need to just mention in general, I know I've kind of like plugged this a whole bunch, but Jonathan is the one that coined the term Art Bro, and that's why this channel is called Art Bros, is because Jonathan used to call me an art bro, and it was, I think, playful hazing to a certain extent, but it was something that kind of I resonated with to a certain extent, and at this point, obviously, I'm just owning it. You know, like I feel like I am an art bro, and an art bro does not need to be a man or a woman, whatever. An art bro can be any artist, but it's just something about it, about the way he was saying it. I was like, huh, I kind of am an art bro, you know, and if you guys scroll down to our very first video and watch that like little really corny introductory thing we did way back when, like there's actually a clip of Jonathan doing an interview with somebody else talking about me, saying, yeah, he's an art bro. And I was just like, I gotta rip that clip and put that in. But yeah, that's just kind of a side tangent. That name came during the AlluxCon era. So,
and to your credit, a huge part of that is that you physically take care of yourself. So the fact that you routinely exercise, not common for artists. And that's part of the art bro aesthetic. You were bringing out a lot of material that was about lifestyle and healthy, positive things that you can implement into your life. Mm-hmm. And it's about, like Nick, something I like about Nick is he has this kind of textbook attractiveness to him where you'd be certain at a glance that he's an absolute asshole. Like there's no way this guy could be insincere if you just saw like a photo of him, because he looks very sly. He has almost like a Mephistophelian face. Now, when you talk to him for a few sentences, then you're like, oh wow, this guy's actually really sweet and really kind, and it's not a problem. But that's awesome. Milk that shit for all it's worth.
I appreciate it.
I'm glad I could say it.
Wolfa said, yeah, Nick definitely feels like that older art bro I can look up to as an artist. I appreciate it.
As well, I 100% agree with Jonathan. Like the first time mentorship, like he looked up to you. So,
yeah, Oliver, we've never talked about this. Why did you choose me to be your mentor originally? I'm very interested to know.
Oh, do I have to put it on live stream?
Maybe we can talk about it off air.
It'll be on YouTube though.
Oh gosh, no, it's just I just felt like there's something about you that felt approachable to me. Like I just I was looking for through a lot of artists, and you came up as a I think I found you through Facebook actually, and just I felt give it a shot really at the time. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I liked your work as well, and I felt like I could you like fantasy and I like fantasy, so I was like, yeah,
match made in heaven, right?
That's all it takes.
And now Oliver's an art bro.
Yeah, awesome.
So I want to kind of go into like the stuff you're doing now, and kind of. By the way, are you okay on time, Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
there's nothing more important right now than doing this with you.
That's good to hear. So I'd say we went to AlluxCon for, I don't know, I think I went like 4 or 5 years in a row, something like that. And then I think it was after kind of I graduated and I started really getting into like trying to find commissions and work and stuff like that. I don't want to say we like lost touch, but there was a gap where kind of like you went in your own direction to do your thing. I went in my direction to do my own thing. So I'm kind of interested to hear how that path went from being like, I want to work in the entertainment industry to I want to do commissions and talk to people and inspire people and do the kind of stuff you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. So if there's any relevant work on my website, this will definitely apply. So my first ever convention that I went to was, that was in 2009. That was the year I went to both SIGGRAPH and also AlluxCon. So my first time getting to engage with professionals in the tech and art industries and realizing that this is just like education-wise and relationally far more important than anything a college could provide me. It made me think that there's some sort of weird little place for me in the entertainment industry. But as I learned more about what it's really like to work in a studio and how it's a young person's game with high turnaround, and that studios do not necessarily, in fact, normally don't care about you as much as they care about the end product. You're really a rent-a-wrist in a lot of context in a studio. That's an unfortunate reality that happens. It made me feel like it might not necessarily be for me. So enter Nick and enter the project we worked on together. Nick and I both believed in the value of this project in some ways more than anyone else on the team, and we really tried to inject things that mattered based on our own experiences. There was resistance there, and it didn't work out, and it left me feeling so jaded. But meanwhile, a positive was also developing on the side. I went to my first furry convention in 2012. It was Anthrocon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I couldn't believe when I was there how many people were grateful that I showed up. And I had like 34, 35 clients that came to me that said, I didn't know you were going to be here. And I didn't know either. It was very last minute for me. But they said,
wait,
you're
sorry,
working
Jonathan, have you... Oh, I'm sorry. So you had already began to cultivate a community before you went
yes.
there, right? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for bringing that back. I should say that when I was in college, I opened for commissions in 2007, and I did not get a single request, even for a ballpoint pen drawing, until 2008. So I get to say I was a professional since 2008 then. And I got the chance to make a lot of mistakes, but also I really started trying to do stuff that was really cool, that had anthro figures, that wasn't compromising on my own standards, because the furry fandom, it doesn't have this problem that much anymore, but back then was only the beginning of people who were artists outside furry bringing in, elevating the technical ability. So I knew after my first convention that these people have these vibrant ideas. There's so much diversity of profession and culture here in the furry fandom. And when you are creating work, when you have a design that's embodying something important about you, whether it's your ideals of what you wish you looked like, or what you wish you could behave as, but you can't, that's a deeply important and critical component that someone shared of you, or shared of themselves, that you otherwise wouldn't get to see. So it's a very artful, almost therapeutic kind of experience. And doing work that's mindful in the context of a furry commission, by asking good questions and doing the best you can elevate that experience to something that changes your life and the client's life for the better. And you do not get that in illustration traditionally. This is something that's so incredibly important to understanding trends in sociology and sexuality, and just like artful expression, that, if we have any libraries left in 50 years, the furry fandom is definitely going to be in there, because this is actually quite an important part in art history. This has never happened before in human civilizations, and it certainly does not exist to this extent in other fandoms. It's really a powerful and awe-inspiring thing that I'm fortunate to be a part of. When I mention the furry fandom, people are like, oh, the furries have money, there's no shame there. And to those people, I want to be like, bitch, my job's way better than yours. I've never met a single artist in the industry who wasn't working in the furry fandom, and I'm like, wow, I wish I had their job. That's so cool. My job's so fucking cool. I stop people from killing themselves. I help people with gender dysphoria. I get to, help people process trauma just because they trust me with things, and then I give them something that they're grateful for the rest of their lives. I don't want to make a fucking video game just because it's cool. People are more important to that to me than, making that game. And
can you give a little bit more information as to exactly kind of what you're doing day to day? Are you primarily doing art? Are you primarily talking to people, streaming? What are you doing? Because I think there's some of our viewers that don't necessarily know what it is you do exactly.
Oh, I guarantee they mostly don't know. I'll recognize any of these names. And if anyone finds me, it's I feel like I'm the least popular of any kind of popular artist. So if you saw kid pics going viral on Twitter anytime, that was probably me. Crimson Vixen, thanks for the kudos. I appreciate that. So I've been doing kid pics because I've been doing it since Isolating 13 weeks ago. And it's because it's a really shitty art program. And when you're doing this, if you do anything that's remotely good, then people will be like, oh shit, this was done in KidPix. And then you see the UI and then you're like, oh man, this is actually, why is this good? It shouldn't be good. So I'm going to link some that got some traction on Twitter, cool. And Nick could share that if he wants.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I've been spending a lot of my times. I'll do my morning streams, streaming video games in German as part of my language practice, which is incredibly important to me. And then I will do streams in KidPix. And I'm at the end of my queue. Over the last few months, I think it's been like 2.5 months, I did 166 images in KidPix as part of raising money because our conventions were canceled. And I am going to stop at about probably 168, maybe 169. Nice. And I will then be working on an Oracle deck in Photoshop. And that'll be for personal art of my black hair character Resin, which is a character that I created. It really feels like a character I found that was an answer to prayer. He's kind of like an illustrated prayer in celebration of sobriety and self-esteem in the face of a very difficult time in my life when it's hard for me to believe in myself. So not only will I be doing those kinds of paintings, but I will be doing work it's about, yeah, the most important thing I have to offer, which is to bring hope to people's lives despite really unhopeful circumstances. And it's...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Oliver, you were saying?
No. I was just saying that, like, does this kind of like call back to the days where you were doing like really beautiful paintings on your DS? Is that kind of like where this?
Yeah. So I'll be writing an article about this on Patreon.
Okay.
And I actually do a decent bit of writing that I put out for free on my Patreon. So let me get a link to that soon. Because it's really important to me that I produce work that's available. I don't want to paywall stuff, but I also need money, so it's complicated. I'll be writing an article about Patreon or about KidPix and how working within limits does something really important for us. We're all working within limits. We're not created in a way that's exactly the same. And whether that's an invisible disability, like your inability to convey your emotions in a clear way, if maybe you have, like, I have facial blindness and dyscalculia, so there are many things that are very difficult for me that I'm good at hiding, and I'm fortunate enough to be dating someone who can handle those issues. But like, everyone's different. Everyone's absolutely different. And when you have the ability to do your best within these really odd shapes that you were forced into, incredible stuff happens, but you really have to give it your all if you want to tap into your potential. That's why KidPix matters. That's also why I was doing images in alchemy. I think I'm the only artist ever that could finish pieces in alchemy rather than just going cool symmetrical mech design. But I pushed the program in alchemy farther than anyone else, and it's not because I'm a great artist. It's because I'm stubborn, and I used it every day since 2009. So yeah, I'm probably the best artist at the program. If you do Google image search for alchemy art program, and then you see my work, you'll be like, are you sure that's that program? Yeah, I'm just a stubborn son of a bitch. I'm really difficult.
And some of these images on your Behance utilize, yeah, definitely, right? These are alchemy.
Yes. So those are definitely alchemy. So those are warm-ups that I would do before I'd work on my commissions. I would give myself an hour and do photo study. So I'm using a program designed to be technically weak and experimental. It's not designed to have great fidelity or control. And I'm also saying I'm going to do a crowd or multiple people, and I only get 1 hour to do these. Just 1 hour, and that's it. That's what I would call an unfair assignment. But when you're stuck in an unfair situation, which again applies to many of us today, then you have to step forward because you know you have no choice. And it only gets done if you do it. So that's something that I would do as a kind of meditative effort, but also as a reminder to everyone in some kind of hyper-aggressive digital Bob Ross sort of way, that you have to be okay with your mistakes. You have to be willing to go on the journey and just accept things. But if you did like a Google image search for alchemy art program, you're going to see what normally happens, and it's certainly not the same thing. These images are traditional as a start with minimal digital on top.
We also got a request for an art bro to shout an art tip. Jonathan, do you have a random art tip you could shout out for us?
Yes. Your relationship to reality correlates with your relationship to your imagination. So if you're like, I don't want to study fabric, that's boring. Well, fabric's actually amazing, and the way light plays with it is incredible. And the way that texture operates in the real world, if you build up your visual lexicon in your mind, your imagination and what you can render becomes stronger. So I refuse to accept that as an excuse in any of my students. But I don't want to do stuff that's real. I don't care. If you want to do vibrant stuff where people fall in love with it, even if it's like, okay, let's use a really extreme example. If you do studies of still life and you've become invested in that, you'll do some really hot pinups, super hot, because you'll be invested in texture, you'll be invested in overlap and all these other things that your brain is subconsciously clued into. You can't just say, I want to do the best werewolves that I can, so therefore I will only draw werewolves. No, you know what will make you really good at werewolves? Doing animal studies. And also, by the way, learning to fall in love with a fucking tree. Can you care about a tree? Imagine a werewolf in an element of like a forest where you can tell the person cares about the plant life. You've offered context, you've offered an image that's now powerful and substantial, and it's way better than just doing the werewolf. So you have to really be invested in the awe that's surrounding you on a daily basis. This is why for my mentees, I will always assign them to take photos of things that they find interesting. They have to be engaged with the light flowing into a window, maybe touching a plant, maybe a reflection on a container with a fluid in it. If they can be invested in this, then they're going to pay attention to more of that in their day-to-day lives. And then it's about taking tactile experiences and having work that's informed. Because if you're not doing that, you're operating in just a tiny slice of what life has to offer, even in your fantastical work. So please bring your experiences in your fantastical work.
I love that.
Little art tip.
I love it.
Little baby art tip.
All right. So let's get back to kind of like your day-to-day. What does that look like?
Okay, so here's the daily routine typically for me. I wake up at 5:20 a.m. if I got enough sleep. I have a lot of nightmares, especially recently, and a lot of anxieties that keep me from feeling well rested, but I've been hitting a good stride recently. So we have this rule where we could wake up maybe at 5:20 and maybe set an alarm for cuddling until like 20 minutes just to be like, oh, this is nice. I want to get out of bed. Okay, now we have to get out of bed. We go upstairs. I put in my contacts, I brush my teeth, I wash my face. If I still feel bad in 10 minutes and I have to go to bed, that's the 10-minute rule and I'm allowed to do it. But so I will do that. I will come over here. I will exercise. Art bro, what's up? And then I will get some breakfast ready. Ideally, I get to spend like an hour studying German. And after that, I have to set up for a stream, which will on my normal days be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'll be streaming a game in German or doing some kind of artwork. I take a 3-hour break and I get to do admin tasks from that time or prepare for, say, shooting references for the next stream. After I've done that 3-hour break, I work from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And that's almost exclusively streaming artwork. So after that's done, we're normally catching up with current events, having discussions, doing more admin tasks. There's lots of stuff about being a professional artist that has nothing to do with drawing. Yep. Nothing. Like you gotta, I'm sorry, you have to learn your way around taxes. There is no other way around it. You can pay a CPA, but even then you have to be willing to organize certain things yourself. So that orders, booking conventions. Sasha handles a ton of this, and even he can't handle all of it. So I have to do some of that every now and then. I also have to cook. So we did a video recently on cooking with sustainable, non-perishable foods that are cheap and vegan. So that way it's not heavy on your body and it's less expensive. That's part of being an artist now. You have to save money. You can't live in a place where the food comes to you forever. So cooking classes in college. Oliver, demand cooking classes. You're worth it.
I feel like I would need I'd need that class. I'd love to watch it sometime.
Yeah. So I actually stream cooking sometimes for that reason, because it's really important. And cooking, this didn't even matter to me when Nick and I knew each other at first, but cooking is so incredibly important to me. I'm really passionate about it in the same way that I'm passionate about studying languages. And I wasn't caring about that as much before when I knew Nick. I feel like I'm a much more complete person than when he and I first met like 8 years ago.
Yeah, I think one of the things about you, Jonathan, is you seem to always have your hands in, I I don't want to call it a hobby, but it's like a side interest. Like obviously like your art stuff and your kind of like identity is your like main driving force. But like as long as I've known you, you've always had these sort of interests in other little things. Do you find that they kind of, you said it makes you a complete person. Do you find them kind of like finding your way into your art in any way?
Absolutely, 100%. So let's do a callback to me mentioning my game addiction. I would wake up when I was a child. I would crawl towards my video game console at the time, a Super Nintendo or maybe a N64. I would turn it on. I wouldn't go to the bathroom. I wouldn't drink water. I wouldn't clean up. I would just like play that until I had to eat food. Yeah. Especially over the summer. And then, yeah, I would just do that as much as I could because I was truly addicted to video games. Now, I'm going to play a game as a cultural experience that forces me to reckon with my target language. Or if I play Smash Brothers, which doesn't have a lot of language to learn while you're fighting, that also has to be about being conscientious. So I'll give you an example of why Smash Brothers can be a really important and valuable lesson. I have a mentee, and before he was my mentee, we were playing Smash Brothers together. During an art stream, we had a voice call going, and I said, okay, Max, we are on Battlefield. There are two platforms. You're this character, I'm this character, and we're right here. I'm going to drop down at the beginning of the match. What are you going to do? And he said, oh, I'm going to go over and do this move, right? And I said, because you did that, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move back, grab you. And I kept playing out this as like fight RP. Yeah. And I promise I'm going somewhere with this. I described to a T what I do based on everything he did. And then he died in the imaginary match. We played the match later that day, and he died in exactly the way that I suggested. And we both screamed in different ways at the result of that. Yeah. Because when you're talking about something like Smash Brothers, it's rock, paper, scissors very quickly. There's a strategy and a metagame to even this. And now if you are fluent in Smash Brothers, you can use Smash Brothers analogy to talk about art. Art is not just a science. Drawing is objective. Drawing is a science and it's about reality, but art is not just objective. There are ways that you can engage with it that is so similar to how you pursue different options in a video game. So whether it's playing Smash Brothers, whether it's the speedrunning community, whether it's any other number of details, if you are a conscientious consumer of what you're doing, it's not just fun. You can use it to enrich and elevate your standard on this earth, and you can even be a better artist through how you play video games. But you have to make the choice to engage with it dynamically and conscientiously, or you truly are just wasting your time. Sometimes you need to waste your time, but you could also have more than that from the process of playing games. Yeah. Wow, I am called out in the chat. So Myers-Briggs might be garbage, but in my case, it's probably not. So I'm between ENF. Oh, no, actually, I'm INFJ. ENFJ or INFJ. You were pretty close. Maybe I'm INTJ now. Fuck it. I don't know. But I really like Carl Jung. He's pretty cool. Yep, there's my answer to that. Everything informs everything if you let it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think going off of that whole video game discussion, for me, it's always been about solving problems. And as an artist, that's like the majority of what you do is solve problems. And I think the reason I've been able to kind of like stick with art so much and kind of excel is from those old habits from my video games where it's like I need to just beat the level. It's like I need to just finish the painting and figure out how to finish the painting kind of thing. It's that same sort of mindset. All right, we're getting from Angry One 118 again, making art bro shout and art tip. Oliver, do you have one this time?
Oh gosh, really put me on the spot. I'd say start from simple to complex, like when doing the whole image. Like, yeah, just think maybe first think the big into more simple shapes and just gradually kind of solve the problem with small as you go along. I don't know if it's
that's a good one. I mean, yeah, I try to use that philosophy with all of my work. It definitely helps instead of starting off with the nitty gritty tiny details.
Type of variant of what Oliver just said too. So keep going.
Okay, so yeah, we talked about video game habits and stuff like that. We talked about basically you getting up to putting your contacts in, I think. Oh no, sitting down. Oh, we talked about you streaming. Okay. Do you So what is this sort of like interest with like learning German? And do you find are you like fluent at this point, do you think?
So I'm category A2. And A2 means I'm elementary level. It means I'm
Okay.
capable of understanding a lot of basics, and I can normally flub my way through conversation. My accent's good enough that people are like, "Oh, maybe he's Dutch or something," because it doesn't sound like a shitty American accent. And the American accent in German is quite bad. You don't want it.
Yeah.
If so, I'm resolved for that, to do that, because not only did I live in Switzerland for on and off for 2 years and had a relationship there, but also I found so many wonderful people since going to Berlin every year for Eurofriends, which is one of my favorite cons. If you study in a language, it changes the way that you think and engage with many different ways, and it actually changes how you engage with English. So if you also open up yourself to a language, you are forced to engage with a new cultural perspective. So for example, the more that I study of Farsi, which will be my next target language, that's Persian in Iran, I will be studying that after German. And as I learn more from Persian studies, then I get to speak more, and that changes how I get to interface with the world around me. I can recognize Persian names now. I can have certain discussions. I can tell based on the way that they forgive someone or apologize for something that there are certain cultural rhythms there that are thousands of years old. And that informs me. Yeah. If you want a really obvious example of this, it's how Japanese has an honorific system where there's a whole separate tense for being super polite. And it's not conjugated words where they change slightly. Sometimes they're just way different words. And it's a shit show for someone who's never learned an Asian language before.
Yeah, but I know that feeling because I'm half Japanese myself, and just like certain sentences, like the context doesn't make sense when it's like translated into English. So it's always like trying to explain to people that it's not the same meaning. It's quite funny one.
So yeah. Like if I apologize to you and or thanked you for something and you were saying you're welcome, how would you say? Would you say yeah? Right?
Yeah, like yeah, it's like my level of like Japanese isn't great because I was like in primary school, but like I'd say there are certain phrases that you have to use when you're talking to like someone that's older than you or younger than you, and like so the way you address their name, like when it's Mr. or Mrs. or that kind of thing. So
and there you could have multiple ways to say I that all means something. Like there's the macho I, and there's the more neutral I, and there's the more feminine I that's also masculine and other prefixtures. And it's wild. The way I learned to say you're welcome is just to say no. Like imagine if someone says, "Oh, thank you so much." No, like don't thank me. No, don't thank me. Like that's so fucking Japanese because it's so polite. It's really great. It's an awesome experience. For me, also my German studies are tied to my future because, I guess we have to be aware that our situation right now for many of us, especially Americans, is very scary. And I can't help but think that as languages increase our potential to go different places, that it's a worthy pursuit for me to be able to speak other languages. And that if I have friends and family that I found through my communities and art, that it might eventually be a better opportunity for me to be in Germany versus, say, the United States. That is a reality I reckon with that makes me feel like the language studies are important. And in a way that's a little less grim, the hope that you can bring to people's lives by doing hopeful artwork. Every time I do imagery, that's something I reckon with. If you're saving people's lives with your art and they consistently have come to you over the years to say, I would have killed myself if it wasn't for what you wrote and what you painted here, then you know that your work is valuable and you have to reckon with this. And that's a good and a bad thing. So say you just did an image just because it was cool and fun. If that sustains you emotionally and brings you some energy, tap into that and enjoy the process. But keep in mind that you have other better things to offer humanity that are far more important than just distractions. That balance will be individual for all of us.
Speaking of that, like how, I don't want to have you say a percentage or anything like that, but like how much of your work do you find you're making that is that deep sort of, you know, philosophical you, and how much of it is just like, I'm just going to do art because I want to paint or I want to be creative or expressive or whatever. Because I know that you kind of have a fine line between like different types of work that you make, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned the kid pics images, or you showed the kid pics images earlier, and that has a lot of philosophical reasonings for why nostalgia is valuable to me. And there's a reclamation of my childhood where I lacked agency because I'm just a kid. But when it comes to my personal work that I do for myself, that is almost always about themes of restoration. It's about destigmatizing sexuality. It's about connecting to the deep spiritual truths in my life that are not restricted by any one religious doctrine. It's about leaving the religion that I grew up in while also never having a crisis of faith, being grateful for the connection I have to whatever this God is, and feeling closer than ever while also technically being excommunicated. That's complicated. So I have to do that kind of work, but at the same time, the only reason I got to do 166 kid pics images is because they're super fucking stupid and really fun.
Yeah.
So if I do really silly, stupid, shitty, or sometimes unapologetically horny on main work in a really silly art program, that is not about my relationship to God necessarily.
Yeah.
It's sometimes just about me getting to explore a new part of myself. For many people, doing something that's cool or just really stimulating on multiple levels, for them, that's the norm. For me, that's actually a novelty I have to discover freshly right now. So getting the space to compartmentalize that with the kid pics UI around the image and to keep it in a separate folder, that's nice too, because it means that people who only care about my more shallow work, they know that that's a part on the side, and that who I am as a person is far more than just entertaining them.
Sure.
So if I were to offer a percentage of my personal work, I'd say it's pushing 100% that has those depths. And for kid pics, I would say maybe 10% or less is approaching that kind of depth. Much more of it is about just having fun and just cutting loose from my rusty cage.
Sure. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when you sit down to do a stream, like, so you said you're going to be stopping doing the kid pics at a certain number. When you go back to your streaming, like, how do you go? Is it just like you're just painting an image that you want to paint, or are you doing commissions live? Like, what, and how many commissions are you still getting at this point and doing?
Oh, this is such a good question. So I've probably done like over 700 commissions in my career before kid pics happened. So now kid pics has happened, I'm probably closer to 1,000. And if it wasn't for kid pics, the amount of commissions I would have done this year is, I think, 2, maybe. Yeah, it's been very small, because as I guess if you pull up my website, so you don't have to now, but if you did go to jonathanvair.com/commissions, you would see that I have some parameters, and the parameters are designed to scare people off. I do not want to work with someone unless it's a really enriching, fulfilling concept where we get to dig our heels in and then learn something new about each other. I believe the most valuable kind of artwork, I believe the most valuable kind of art experience we could have is if there's a client here and a commissioner here. The art is in the middle where my head is. That's the end product. We both go outside of ourselves. So they go outside their comfort zone and I go outside my comfort zone. We have discussions after I'm like, it's okay, you can do this. And they're like, are you sure? Okay. And then we create something that challenged both of us. And that entire conversation to me is art. It's not just a transaction, and it's not just a business. The way that I interface with my clients has to be about fulfilling a need that they have in their lives, but also about me sharing my personal truths. And if that does not necessarily align with the client, maybe I can find a way to go outside my experiences that's happened before. For example, when I was a pacifist, drawing an image that's true to wanting to kill someone and having good reasons to want that. That's a hard thing to do, but I professionally handle those kinds of jobs. So currently, I have a queue of some very kind and curious and thoughtful people who I'm thankful to say are willing to invest like $2,500 per image. I'd say there are about 4 or 5 of them waiting for me to just reach out to them. And I've told them, shit's on fire, yo. I got to finish all these kid pics. And I worked pretty fast on them, all things considered. So I'm going to be contacting some of them this week and saying, all right, I never forgot your ideas. I love it. Let's go. I can do at least one of these a month. And Sasha and I talked about finances. He crunched the numbers and said that based on our Patreons, if I do one of these commissions per month and we launch a Kickstarter at the end of the year, if we could, for my Oracle deck, then basically Sasha won't have to take on commissions and do the work that doesn't sustain him. He gets to do personal work. And that's important enough that I want to work hard for him to have that means to do it. Because for those who don't know, my partner Sasha is an artist. His work is absolutely awesome. And I'm not dating him because he's a great artist. I'm dating him because he's incredibly brave and incredibly hardworking. And I love my time on this earth more. I'm more deeply connected to both nature and other people because I've opened myself up to him.
That's awesome.
So I think that answers the question.
Yeah. I want to ask too, though, because these commissions are so intimate with the client, is this something that you stream live, or is this something you kind of do on your own time and send the image?
I used to do character design commissions, and for those, I would have a conversation. I'd ask them, can we stream this live, or does that feel like it's trespassing on you? Because normally people are like, hey, I have this idea for a character. It's going to look like this. And I'll be like, okay, well, that's fine. You have this idea, but we need to talk about your relationship to what you like and why, because you might be creating a design that doesn't fulfill my philosophical needs that I have for work. So you might just want to be like, I have a wolf and he's anthro and he's really hot and here is his exact height and his exact shoe size and whatever. And I'll be like, I actually don't give a shit about that. I'm more invested in what's most important to you as a person and how we can illustrate that if this character represents you. This conversation will inevitably go to places that surprise both of us, not necessarily Twitch appropriate, and not necessarily the kinds of things where you want to share that with anyone. So what I've decided to do is, if a client is serious about a painting, if their budget starts with something that's like, we'll say, I don't really want to work less than $1,000 now. And I really like having next to no commissions where the cap is much smaller or where the cap is much bigger. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel like I can use my empath skills and not burn out as much.
Yeah.
If I will say, okay, well, let's just do a call. And that might take 2 hours. It might even take 3 hours, but at least we'll know what's up. And then if you can't work with me, you'll have the thoughts articulated to work with someone else. And I already know that you care about my time because you're willing to put down this much money upfront at minimum. So I always ask that, how much are you willing to invest in this? If they're like, oh no, $150, I'll be like, well, my minimum's $180. And then we're going to do a Hail Mary thing where I take your idea and I do what I want with it and you get no revisions. And it's just going to be a sketch that looks like, waist up and it's going to be loose. So, and I don't like doing that anymore. I don't even like doing that.
Yeah.
I want the conversation. I want the people who are going to talk privately with me and where we get to hug and feel like we're closer.
And just kind of talking to like younger artists or artists that are just like starting to get commissions and stuff like that, I think it's also important to mention that like getting to this point in your career does not happen overnight where you can just like have the ability to like turn down stuff, right? It takes a long time and is something that you need to be confident in doing. And I get kind of where I'm like kind of in a similar sort of situation where if something is like really not feeling right for my financial situation or for, if I just want to do it or whatever, I'm kind of at the point now where I can, and it feels awesome, but I've had to do many, many paintings just to kind of like pay the bills kind of thing. So just know that like, at a certain point there is that like that uphill battle and that kind of crunch. And as we were saying before, those experiences you just need to have with working with clients to kind of get to where you inevitably want to be. So
yeah, and there's another qualifier to this too. You should definitely be developing skills that doesn't require a dissertation beforehand and doesn't require some kind of like, silly background check or something. I don't want to call it that way, but I've had a critic refer to me as a charlatan who does that. So it's stuck in my head now.
Wait, what do you mean by that exactly?
I've been accused of being a con artist for doing work that has more meaning. And I've also been accused of tricking people into opening up to me when I've said that I want to work with themes that are a little more personal. So yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like the purchaser's responsibility to, decide whether or not they want to work with you.
Yes.
In my opinion.
Yes, exactly. So it's the truth. So I don't claim to be something that I'm not. And I also don't just like run away with people's money or anything, but There was a time where I was trying to figure out what to do with calls, and I would have to say, I can do consultations for character design stuff, but I have to charge you like $100 an hour for this because I try and earn $120 an hour for stylist to screen time. Mm-hmm. Now that's gone completely out the window with my kid pick streams. With all 166 images, guarantee you I was not making $120 an hour on them. The minimum started at $10 per image, and now the minimum's $180, so it's actually close. Or minimum is $80 per image, so it did actually become closer to something that I would like as a regular.
Sure.
Especially because a lot of the time I'll go way over budget, and I'll tell my client, "Hey, this work I wanted to put extra time in it. I ended up doing this much amount of money for work. So on your PayPal invoice, you're free to pay extra money there, or you can tip me. But you have no obligation to do that because we agreed to the amount that we agreed to." But I did want to say, when you're accepting work and trying to get your chops and then figure out how to engage with commissions and whatnot, you will be accepting stuff and you might like it at first and then go, "Oh, I actually wish I never did this." That's actually going to happen to you, guaranteed. Mm-hmm. You can't possibly foresee all the mistakes that are happening. And part of being a seasoned professional is navigating preemptively when a bad thing happens, and you steer way around it to keep your path nice and smooth and quick. Mm-hmm. If you do accept things that you do not like, do not publish them in a place where it's, don't even publish it. Don't get more work that's like the thing you didn't want to do.
Yeah, I think that's a big sort of like more of like a noob thing you kind of just need to be told that. Where it's like, yeah, if you really hated doing a painting and you never want to do a painting like that again, then you most likely shouldn't be promoting that work that you've done, right? That's why I always advocate for, if you can have the time to work on a personal project, then at least you know that all the work that's being created is of your interest and all of a similar theme.
I like oversimplifying things aggressively. So the way I oversimplify this general idea is you are as defined by the work you do, like the work you take on, as the work you choose not to accept. Both of those are equally defining you. And you wouldn't think it like, why would it matter based on things I turn down? Oh, it fucking matters. It matters. It's just invisible, but oh, does it matter? It is so important to your life.
Jonathan, could you post a link to your stream in the chat when you get the chance, just so that people can check you out?
Yeah, by all means.
Cool. Awesome.
My next stream is Thursday, by the way, 9 a.m. Mountain Date Time. That should be 11 a.m. Eastern.
Cool. Cool. So, yeah, let me just look through my notes really quick. Oliver, do you have any questions for Jonathan?
I guess the last question would be, what would you, if you got to go back, like during art school, what advice would you give yourself? Like when you were...
I have thought of this too. The problem is the spot that I took in life was a result of so many decisions I wouldn't have repeated. So, we talked about not meeting Nick and whatever else, or my marriage and divorce, that I have zero regrets about it. And I'm so grateful for being included and like having my ex-wife as part of my journey. I would never turn that down. Like I wouldn't turn down any of that suffering based on where I am now. It's really important for me to help others. So if we just assume that everything's going to be okay, if that didn't happen to me, if I address the question from just an art practice, my freshman year is when this is applicable because I started kicking my own ass after sophomore year. My freshman year, I would have said that if you like, hey, could you not play video games for 2 years? And this is actually advice that I stole from Noah Bradley. He had like a little list of tips. And Noah, in suggesting that, isn't saying video games are bad or going to stop you. But the time you're investing in a video game or Netflix or whatever, that's not going to contribute to your life in the same way as just keeping your head down and practicing to be able to focus. Another thing I would mention to myself in the past is that even though I'm in an environment that legally does not allow me to do sexual content because I signed terms of service for a private Christian school, there's a reason why I'm so scared and so sad about my sexuality. And there's a reason why I feel a great sense of shame when I think about the things that I like. And it's because I was told that that makes me less of a valuable person, and that it's much more important for me to ask people who are different than me what they can teach me rather than judging them. Mm-hmm. That affects my ability to draw things that are about different cultures, and also to do work that's sex positive, since over half of my life was spent hating myself by design because of what I was interested in. And pornography isn't objectively wrong. It can be used to bring healing and restoration, but you have to want that, and you have to pursue that. So I would have definitely told myself, just so you know, that's possible.
Cool. Thank you. That's awesome.
All right, we got one more art tip shout out from Angry1118. I'll cover this one. He asked for a comic tip specifically. So hopefully this isn't one that you already know, but when making a comic book page, make sure that all of the panels, the action that's going on in the panels, point to the next panel that you're going to be looking at. So generally, like, you can imagine almost like a Z shape going from left to right. So the bottom-most panel should be basically pointing to the next page. Doesn't mean that everybody's head needs to be looking at each other, but just the composition of each panel should be fluid so that the reader can navigate the panels more easily. So that's my art tip.
Understanding comics.
Art comic. What did I take? I took like a art comic like class when I was a kid. And I've read a lot of comic books.
Scott McCloud's Understanding and Making Comics is just like, oh my goodness, that's a college education right there. Those are good texts.
I have not checked that out. I've read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way like 500 times though.
Scott McCloud's awesome.
Scott McCloud. Even let's say for large scenes, and also thanks a lot. Yeah, even with the splash panel, you want to make sure that always the energy is like going to the next page, so that the reader is always like trying to look ahead, basically. Cool. So we covered a lot of stuff in the stream. Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for your time. This has been really great. It was really cool catching up. We need to talk more often. That's what this stream is reminding me more than anything. But I'm really happy that we finally got you on and to talk about your experiences and kind of talk about how we met and kind of the origin of the Art Bro story, so to speak. So. Yeah, where can I push people to find you on the internet?
So my art is active on Twitter. I just linked to twitter.com. That doesn't do anything. Oh my God.
I think it's twitter.com/Jonathan
Jonathan Vair. Oh.
That's all right.
All right. So again, my Patreon, which has free writing content, that's one of the really the most important stuff that I've written is right there. If you're of legal age to view mature content, then I recommend that you go to gum.co/BOK. So this is my image archive that was about my marriage, divorce, addiction, recovery, and all that stuff. If you can't afford the price tag, but these themes are really useful to you, then just like direct message me and I'll give you a download code. I'm very serious about helping people who could use that help, and getting that together sucked. So I'm glad I did it, and I don't have to do it again. Oh, I'm making it a book. Gonna have to do it again, and that's gonna suck. But yeah, I really want to get that energy out there that's encouraging people to be vulnerable and introspective. I want introspective to be sexy.
That's awesome.
Right. And of course, my Twitch stream one last time.
Sure.
I'm streaming like 30-something hours a week, so it's pretty easy to get to me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for watching and sticking with us. This has been really great. And guys, just so you know, the monthly challenge is due, and Oliver and I will be doing a monthly challenge critique stream this Thursday. So just stay tuned for that. And yeah, we'll catch you guys later. Keep on drawing, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Perfect.